Hello! Thank you for visiting me again in the village of Richka in Carpathia. My name is Ina. I changed the capital for a mountain village and I don't regret it at all. And if you want to support this channel, I'll ask you to subscribe to it, like the next video and leave a comment under it. Thank you for that. It's quite chilly outside today, so I even put on this vest to go for a walk in the woods. Here in the Carpathians, vests like this are called gunya. They are made by master from natural materials, wool. In fact, this is a very complicated technique, so a real gunya is very expensive. I have a simpler version of this outwear, and it is very comfortable. In the morning I went to the forest to look for mushrooms. It had recently rained in the mountains, so the mushrooms began to grow actively. Here are the first Cossacks this year. That's why they are called boletus mushrooms here. They can have a dark brown or red cap. There are a lot of them in the Carpathians, just like porcini mushrooms. But poisonous species are also found here, so if you don't know much about mushrooms, it's not advisable to pick them yourself. It's better to take someone more knowledgeable with you to the mountains. The forest is quiet, only last year's leaves creak underfoot, and when you step on it, you immediately get a sense that you only be heard in the Carpathians. The smell of the rotten leaves is very pleasant. I like to walk along the forest path without purpose, enjoying the silence and the special atmosphere that can only be found here. After rain, it's better to wear waterproof shoes in the mountains. Locals walk on the hills in gumakas, rubber boots. And I'm almost a local, so I already have such shoes. Also in the highlands, it's much more convenient to wear special trekking boots that fix the foot well. To relieve my knees a bit, I find a long, strong stick and walk around the mountains with it. You can buy special sports balls that fold and unfold, which will definitely come in handy when hiking. For such short walks, you can also use improvised materials. Avid mushroom pickers are constantly arguing about the right way to pick mushrooms. Some say that the stem should be carefully unscrewed from the mycelium. Others argue that this can damage the mycelium, so all mushrooms should be cut with a knife. But this method is not ideal either, because if the cut stem remains in the mycelium, it begins to rot, destroying the entire mycelium. Then I can come home and see what I have collected today. By the way, you can see how we are preparing for winter. This is how much firewood we have already prepared. You have to clean the mushrooms very carefully. I immediately separate the cap from the stem and remove the top layers of the stem. It's easy to clean mushrooms, but you have to do it as soon as you come home from the forest. If you leave everything collected for a few hours, the mushrooms will start to deteriorate very quickly. That's why I don't hesitate. But I really want to have beauty around me, so I put the mushrooms away for a while and hurry to the makeshift flower bed in the yard to pick flowers. I do this with secateurs. It's convenient because you can cut the stem very quickly. Marigolds, daisies are the simplest flowers that grow anywhere, but they are so beautiful and fragrant. The space immediately changes when there are flowers, and it becomes cozy and pleasant. I love it when there is a bright bouquet on the table. I love to create different composition myself. Of course, I don't do it like a professional florist, but the most important things in the soul I put into this process. But let's get back to the mushrooms. Today I have good catch. I even managed to find these giants. You have to remove the entire top layer from them, clean and wash them very carefully. Forest mushrooms taste best with potatoes, so today I'm combining these ingredients, but you have to peel the potatoes first. And in order to cook today's dinner, I need firewood. You already noticed that we have a lot of it. Also, we need even more for the winter. The houses in the Carpathian villages are mostly heated by stoves. On the one hand, it's very convenient because we do not depend on centralized communications. On the other hand, we have to start preparing for the heating season in the summer. I light the fire outside. We have a campfire area in our yard where you can cook or just watch the flames in the evening. I have already learned how to make a fire very well. And while the fire is burning, I'm peeling onions because I'll need them today. It seems to me that there are no people who cook wild mushrooms without onions. It's a classic combination. All that remains is to wash both raw vegetables and mushrooms well. And then the fun begins. I grate the potatoes on a fine grater. It has to be done very carefully because you can easily hurt your fingers. I chop the onion finely with a knife, but I cut mushrooms into large pieces. Anyway, they will lose a lot of volume and size during heat treatment. I pour a little sunflower oil into a hot frying pan, and after it warms up, I put the mushrooms in. Many people boil them before frying, but I'm confident in their freshness and origin, so I can afford a one-step heat treatment. Mushrooms release juice very quickly, so they are not so much fried as stewed. And when they are already frying, you can add onions to the pan. All you have to do is salt the vegetables in the pan and add a little spice. Now I heat the wheat flour in half the pan to make it nice creamy shade and add a little sour cream. It turns out to be a delicious, thick white sauce. I mix it with mushrooms. Just look at how incredibly beautiful this mushrooms gravy is. Now imagine how flavorful and delicious it is. But it's time to move on to the next stage of preparing today's dinner. I put the grated potatoes in cheesecloth to remove excess moisture. To the semi-dry mixture, I add 2 eggs, a pinch of salt, ground black pepper, and a little flour. I mix it all thoroughly. I put the potato pancakes on a hot frying pan and fry them on both sides. Of course, there are the legendary Carpathians pancakes. This dish is very popular here. It is cooked everywhere. This incredible golden, crispy beauty immediately provokes a crazy appetite. Lunch is almost ready, but I'm in no hurry to eat. I want to stop for a minute, look around, and enjoy the moment. Only in summer the Carpathians are so friendly, beautiful, incredibly warm and cozy. In winter the mountains are beautiful in their own way, and you can fall in love with them right away. But when it's warm outside, it's a special pleasure. I still have some small mushrooms and I decide to dry them. To do this, I thread each mushroom with a needle and a long thread. Make a beautiful, unusual necklace and hang it in a dry, dark place to dry. Then in winter you can make a soup or any other dish from these mushrooms. But it's time to set the table for dinner. I lay out the tablecloths because I want to have lunch at a beautiful table. I put flowers that I picked during the day and earthenware with cursive-style paintings. Local dishes should be eaten only from such dishes. Then they seem even more delicious. Pancakes with thick mushroom gravy are incredibly tasty. Come to the Carpathians to try this dish. Thank you for spending another day with me. I look forward to seeing you in the next episodes. The Carpathians are very bright and colorful in summer, and I want bright colors not only outside but also inside the house. That's why I decided to pick a bouquet of flowers in the morning. It's nice to live in the countryside where you don't have to go to a florist and pay a lot of money to get a flower arrangement. It's enough to go out the yard and cut flowers. Perhaps such a bouquet will not be too sophisticated and stylish, but it will definitely create a cozy atmosphere in the house. But I still have some floristic skills, so I put the bouquet in a vase according to all the rules. First, I cut the flowers, then arrange them so that the composition is balanced and harmonious. This is a wonderful bouquet made almost from wild flowers. It gives me inspiration for the whole day. But it's time to move on to other things. I need to heat the stove. Of course, living in a big city, I didn't know how to do it. I acquired similar skills here in Carpathia. Now I know how best to lay out the wood so that it burns quickly, how to throw it into the firebox, how to clean the stove so that it does not clog. There is something mystical in all this, something that connected us with our ancestors. By the way, it is in Carpathians that people have always taken care of decorating stoves. Piec or hrubka is how the stove is usually called here. They were used not only in rural houses but even in apartments in cities, and such a stove was always painted or tiled. In the kitchen, I always have samples of the legendary cursive ceramics, which is included in the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Of course, these are more modern products, but earlier the entire stove was covered with such tiles, each depicting certain scenes for everyday life. That is, you could look at the stove for hours, like a comic book. When you have a stove in your house, you always have to make sure that there is always firewood nearby. And now I am in a hurry to go to the garden because I have a lot of to do there too. I have to pick a big ripe pumpkin. I am going to cook it for lunch today, but first the large fruit must be thoroughly washed. It's time to cut the pumpkin. For this I need a large knife. I cut off the top part of the fruit and clean out all the seeds from the inside. By the way, if the seeds are properly dried, they will be stored until the next year, and they can also be used to grow large and tasty pumpkins. Pumpkin is traditionally used in Ukrainian cuisine. It is baked, boiled, mashed, or souped. But for me, the most delicious is porridge with pumpkin baked in the oven. That's what I'm going to cook today. To do this, I take corn grits, the same kind of grits that I used for banosh. It needs to be mixed with sugar and raisins. For proportions here are very conditional because you have to take into account the degrees of sweetness or juiciness for the pumpkin itself. The filling must be mixed very thoroughly. You can do it with a special spoon or with your hands. I like the second option because it gives you a tactile sensation that cannot be compared to anything else. Of course, you have to wash your hands thoroughly afterwards. And then everything is very simple. I use the same pumpkin instead of the saucepan. I put the sweet corn grits inside to smooth them out. Then I pour fresh cow's milk over it. It should cover the grits by about 1.5 to 2 centimeters, but that's not all. To make the corn and pumpkin porridge even tastier, I add a large piece of homemade butter to it. It's a calorie bomb, of course, but you can only imagine how this summer dish tastes. To prevent the pumpkin from burning during baking, you need to rub it in foil on all sides. It looks like a shiny, almost alien ball. The top of covered with the cut-off top of the pumpkin. It serves as a lid. If I were baking this dish in an ordinary electric oven, I wouldn't need foil, but given that this dish will be baked in a real wood-burning oven, the pumpkin might just burn without foil. While the oven is preheating well, I have a little time. I use it to clean the pumpkin seeds and dry them. Each seed must be separated from the fibrous structure of the pumpkin. By the way, many people think that pumpkin is a vegetable. Also, botanics consider it a fruit. But unlike apples, pears, or peaches, pumpkin is much less caloric. Even patients with diabetes are allowed to eat it, through to a limited extent. Pumpkin has a high fiber content and it low in calories, which is also nutrition loved. Many people think that this fruit is not very tasty, but in reality, you just need to learn how to cook it. For my dish, I also need walnuts. First, I need to peel them and cut them into small pieces. It is walnuts that are recommended for vegetarians to eat so that the body gets enough fatty acids. In addition, walnuts are high in various trace elements that have a positive effects on brain function. It's time to put our stuffed pumpkin in the oven. The dish also absorbs the flavors of wood. Still, cooking over an open fire is always more interesting. When the porridge in the pumpkin is ready, I take it outside, where the table is already set. I wish the camera could capture the flavor of this dish. It's unbeatable. The cereal has absorbed the butter and milk, is well cooked and smells like pumpkin. This dish can be eaten for lunch or breakfast or served as a dessert. Just trust me, it's very, very tasty. Of course, I wouldn't eat such a huge portion by myself, but I will be happy to share it with my neighbors with whom we have already become good friends. And you too can make this dish to see how delicious, nutritious, and flavorful it is. This evening has become even more beautiful thanks to delicious food made from natural ingredients. This morning I have a lot to do. I am in a hurry to go to the chicken coop to feed the birds, and secondly, to collect fresh eggs. This should be done right away in the morning, because there is a high probability that the hens will break their own eggs. They lay them right on the hay. There are a lot of eggs now, and this is very good because homemade eggs are much healthier than store-bought ones. A little piglet lives nearby. Villagers have to keep livestock to provide themselves with everything they need for a normal existence. I never thought that chickens are such smart birds. You can safely let them out in the yard. They will definitely not run away. They always come home. They know exactly where they can walk. It's very interesting to watch them. It is a completely different world. I used to live in the capital, where I was surrounded by completely different colors, so here I still can get used to such bright green grass that hardly turns yellow in summer. I am fascinated by this unsurpassed beauty of nature. You feel harmony everywhere here. The mountains attract me, and I am sincerely glad that I can always watch them. It's just a fairy tale, but life in the village is hard and busy. You have to work hard to get something. For example, I am developing my own culinary skills here. By the way, in the summer it's very convenient to cook right outside. The fresh air and beautiful scenery set you up for various experiments. I especially like working with dough now. You shouldn't be afraid of it. If you strictly follow the proportions specified in the recipe, everything will work out. This time I need 2 glasses of water at room temperature, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of sugar, wheat flour, 2 eggs, and a little vegetable oil. Mix all of this in one bowl and mix thoroughly. The way you knead the dough directly affects the final result. In the old days, it was believed that one should work with dough only in a good mood and after prayer. That is why Ukrainians attach great importance to bread. Actually, this is a tradition of any country. We have a saying, bread is the head of everything, and believers associate the body of Christ with bread. So I try to think about something positive when I knead the dough. It's good if you have a kneader at home, but I belong to the category of people who believe that dough should be kneaded only with your hands. This is the only way to feel its structure, density, and the other characteristic. This is the only way to make it elastic and tasty. When I look around at these flowers, trees, grasses, and hills, my mood immediately improves. It is not surprising that people who use various spiritual practices for self-discovery come to the Carpathians every year. Just amazing how wonderful it is to do yoga, for example, with such views. In fact, I moved to the Carpathians for a different reason, and now I enjoy my leisurely life. But back to the dough. The finished piece of dough should be rolled out quite thinly, and using an originally glass, you should cut out circles of dough like this. Of course, today I am going to make my own dumplings. And now just any dumplings but ones with cheese. This is a traditional dish of Precarpathia, and while in the central regions of Ukraine sweet dumplings with cottage cheese are originally cooked, in the west salted dumplings are more common. The cottage cheese is pressed salt, and you can add a variety of herbs to it. It is up to the individual's preference. And pitching dumplings correctly is a real art. I confess that I didn't master it right away. This is the beauty I get when I made a real homemade dumplings. Now you can either cook them right away or freeze them. Of course, Ukrainian cuisine is associated with more than just dumplings for the general public. When we talk about Ukrainian dishes, it's hard to imagine them without lard. Indeed, it is almost a national product. Lard is eaten with everything, with first courses, with side dishes, as an independent snack. So I cut the delicious lard into thin slices. I will use it to make the legendary Ukrainian cracklings. So I continue to cut the lard into cubes. And how can you do this without onions? I also cut them into cubes to fry them in a pan. The more onions, the juicier the roast will be. I have an electric stove in my house, but I prefer to cook on a wood stove even in summer. It is very convenient for me. In addition, most of the dishes are much tastier this way. And now I put a frying pan on the fire, heat it up well and fry the onions and bacon. This is a classic dressing for salt pumpkins. A little more and dinner will be ready. But I still have a lot of things to do outside. For example, I need to paint some wooden pieces. I'm even trying to create furniture with my own hands. It's a very interesting and exciting process. But let's not get distracted from lunch. The dumplings are ready. They are served in a deep clay jug, which is called a makitra in almost all regions of Ukraine. Natural clay keeps the temperature well, so the dish stays hot longer in makitra. What are dumplings without sour cream? Enjoy! One of the huge advantages of living in the Carpathians is that you don't have to order clean, tasty drinking water with delivery. You can just take a walk in the woods and collect water from a natural spring. It flows from the ground undergoes multi-layer purification but retains numerous trace elements useful for the human body. This water can be drunk and cooked with, but there is one life hack that should always be used. Do not collect water from springs that are too close to human settlements. The higher the spring is in the mountains, the farther it is from people, the cleaner the water will be. And now it's time to cook. Just listen to the crunch of fresh young cabbage as I cut it. What a fantastic sound! I need to separate the leaves of the cabbage, so I cut off the rest of the stem and pour boiling water over the cabbage. I leave the pot under the lid for a while. In the meantime, I had other things to do. I need to chop the tomatoes and put them through a meat grinder. This year summer is very warm. I would even say hot. Spring was also early, so all the vegetables and fruits ripened much earlier than usual. The tomato harvest this summer is good because they love the warmth. Just look at how fresh, juicy, and delicious they are. For some dishes that call for tomato juice, you can peel the tomatoes beforehand. I didn't do this because I am a bit limited in time. I have to do several things at once. Before I have time to process the tomatoes, I have to start a fire. But I am not complaining, it's even more interesting. In our yard, we have a recreation area where you can have a barbecue or just sit in front of an open fire at any time, watching the elements. I've already learned how to lay out firewood correctly to quickly start a fire. This process has its own secrets, but the most important thing is the firewood is well dried. Now I take the cereal, pour hot water over it, and leave it to swell. Meanwhile, you can chop the onion. I chop it finely, just like the carrots. You could grate them, but I find it more convenient to work with knife. The fire, meanwhile, has flared up, and the kettle I put next to it is gradually heating up. Cooking over an open fire in summer is very convenient, as I have said many times before. Moreover, you can cook almost anything in this way without exception, and the dishes on the fire are very tasty and flavorful. Meanwhile, the cauldron and the sunflower oil in it are already well heated, so you can add onions and carrots. Stir the vegetables constantly to prevent them from burning. And when the roast is ready, you need to quickly transfer it to a deep bowl. These deep, cone-shaped clay plates are often called makitra here. Now I add the rest of the vegetables to the cauldron and immediately add the ground tomatoes. This is how you can quickly prepare an alternative to canned tomato taste in the summer. The vegetable and tomato mixture is stirred, and it also needs to be stirred constantly. I add the first batch of roast, which was without tomato, to the cereal, which has absorbed all the water and turned into porridge. I also add 4 eggs. This mixture needs to be salt, peppered, and mixed thoroughly. And now we return to our cabbage. Under the influence of boiling water, the leaves have cooked a little, and now they are easily separated from each other. You can cut it into long strips. And now the most interesting process begins. I wrap the minced meat made from porridge and fried vegetables in cabbage leaves. The result is cabbage rolls like this. This is a traditional Ukrainian dish, but many people believe that only a mixture of rice and minced meat can be used as a filling. As you can see, this is not true. The stuffing from cabbage rolls can be anything. I cook this vegetarian version of this dish, and I want to note that it is no less tasty than the traditional one that anyone is used to. In the meantime, I have time to go to the garden. In my yard, there are these small beds, but they grow everything we need. There are a lot of herbs here. For example, basil, which I like to add to absolutely all dishes without exception. As you can see, in our family, not only I love all kinds of herbs, but also the dog. And the cabbage rolls are ready. I decorate them with the same basil. The flavor of the dish is instantly filled with new bright notes. Just look how beautiful is it, and take my word for it. This dish is also incredibly tasty. And if you are not ready to trust me just like that, you can check it out by making lean cabbage rolls yourself. That's what a wonderful outdoor lunch I have today. Summer is a wonderful time of year to enjoy the warmth, sunbath, and eat delicious fresh fruits and vegetables. This year in July there are already delicious watermelons. Here in the Carpathians they also grow, but not as much as in the south. Still, watermelons need a warm, sunny, dry climate. Then they will be very sweet and juicy. In my childhood, we used to eat watermelons in slices. Some people managed to preserve them like cucumbers or tomatoes. And perhaps all people can be divided into three conventional categories. Some have never tried canned watermelons in their lives and have no idea what they are. Others have tried this unique dish but don't like it, and others simply adore canned watermelons. But today I'm going to cook something completely different, though also quite unusual. But first things first. First I need to separate the flesh of the watermelon from the rind and cut it into medium-sized pieces. As you can see, I am not limited to one ripe berry. By the way, the debate over whether watermelon is a berry, a fruit, or even a vegetable is still ongoing. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. It's so hot outside that you should definitely wear a hat. Otherwise, it's very easy to become a victim of sunstroke or heat stroke. Take care of yourself in the summer. Wear hats, use sunscreen, and most importantly, drink plenty of clean water. It always helps you feel better. If you think that I just cut up the watermelon to eat it quickly, you are mistaken. I have completely different plans for it. Now I need to puree the flesh. It's also important to strain this puree to get all the seeds out of it. It's good that the new varieties of watermelon have very few seeds. Of course, when I cook outside, especially something sweet, I make sure that there are no flies, bees, or wasps around. These insects love sweets and immediately flock to the aroma, but today no one is bothering me, which makes me happy. it's time to light the fire. To do this, I gather dry firewood, pile it up, and set it on fire. The fire flares up quickly, but it is safe because the space for the fire is limited by large stones. But still, you have to keep an eye on the fire. While the fire is burning, I have one more important thing to do. I don't throw away the watermelon rind, I peel it. We don't need the hard dark green part, so I peel it and throw it away. But the light green part of the rind will be used further, and I cut it into small cubes. Now I pour it all into a deep pan with a thick bottom and add sugar, and this mixture can be put on the fire. Under the influence of high temperature, the water from the watermelon rind is released, and the sugar also melts, and this mixture turns into this unusual jam. The mixture must be boiled to destroy all pathogens. Of course, the watermelon rind will not be as soft as, for example, apple jam, but it makes delicious candied fruit. But first, I need to preserve the watermelon juice that I got from the pulp. To do this, I also need to disinfect the jars. To do this with boiling water. Also, when it's hot outside, you can leave the jars in the sun. It will be enough. Now I pour the juice, which I also boiled beforehand, into the jars. It has such a beautiful color. The last step is to roll up the lids. This should be done very carefully. You don't even need to add sugar to watermelon juice. It already contains a lot of fructose, which is natural preservative. I want to preserve the ready-made candied fruit in jars because it can already be eaten with fresh bread and it's very tasty. They look like marmalade both in taste and appearance, but it's much tastier than store-bought marmalade, so I don't throw away watermelon rinds. They can be used to make such incredible delicacies. If you put a layer of this unusual jam on a slice of fresh white bread, sit down comfortably, look around so that your breath is once again taken away by the surrounding scenery. You can feel real happiness. It always lives inside us. It does not depend on external circumstances. It is our source of inner strength. Don't even lose it. Thank you for spending another day with me. I look forward to seeing you in the next episodes. I love cooking very much. This passion appeared even before I moved to Carpathia, but it has only intensified here. This region is known for its unique gastronomic culture and authentic cuisine, which is hard to compare with anything else. So, come to the Carpathians, you will definitely have a good meal here. Of course, I like to visit some trendy restaurants or cozy hearts with traditional dishes, but the most delicious is always what you cook with your own hands. That's why I experiment in the kitchen from time to time. Today is also my culinary day. First, I need to knead the dough. I sieve the flour, pour water into a deep bowl, add generous salt, and add vegetable oil. This is a great base for lean dough. I just need to add a flour and mix everything thoroughly. I confess that I prepared a starter in advance and now I add it to the dough. The main thing in this process is to knead it very actively and thoroughly. And now you can leave the mixture alone and let the yeast work. Of course, I am not going to be idle at this time. I need to light the stove and put the sweet potatoes on the cook. In the villages of Carpathian, they keep their ancient traditions alive. They cook in wood-burning stoves even in summer. In fact, it's very convenient, especially in these changing times. It was also here in the Carpathians that I started embroidering. This is also a tradition that is passed down from generation to generation. In the past, an embroidered ornament on a shirt was considered a kind of element against ill thoughts. It provided protection to its owner. Each element of traditional Ukrainian embroidery has certain meaning. It is the code of the Ukrainian nation. hand-embroidered shirt has a special energy. In addition, the process of embroidery is very common. It helps to organize thoughts and muffle violent emotions. It helps me to balance myself a lot. I also love walking in nature. It's good that there are endless opportunities of this here. This is the main advantage of living in a Carpathian village. Mountains and meadows are nearby. Here you are always in the bosom of nature. Just amazing. In the city, to get a bunch of parsley, you have to go to the market or supermarket. For me, it's enough to go out into the yard and walk to the garden where the herbs grow. But I have to hurry back to the house. The sweet potatoes are already fully cooked there. This root vegetable is considered healthier than potatoes. It contains a lot of different vitamins and microelements, but until recently sweet potatoes were not widespread in Ukraine. Now everything is changing, so I am happy to cook mashed sweet potatoes. Now it's time to make the next culinary preparations. To do this, you need chicken, which needs to be divided into separate parts, and vegetables, carrots, onions. In order not to waste too much time, I cut the vegetables into large pieces. It even looks more authentically pleasant to me. And now I have to grind it all in the meat grinder. I don't have an electric grinder, only a manual one, so I have to put a lot of effort into making minced meat. But I try to look for a positive in everything, so I set myself up for the fact that such physical activity is actually very useful. Meanwhile, the dough is already very good. It's loose but very elastic at the same time. I still need to cook the broth. I put clean water on the fire, add chicken and pre-fried vegetables. Then the broth immediately gets an incredible flavor. But I have completely different plans for minced chicken. I add salt and pepper to it and then knead it very well to make it homogeneous. Then I form small meatballs from the minced meat. I add 4 chicken egg yolks to the dough and then knead it thoroughly. Working with dough is a separate pleasure and 100% anti-stress. As a result, it should be quite stiff but elastic. I roll out the finished dough into a thin layer and then cut it into thin strips. This is a simple and affordable way to make delicious homemade noodles. Do you still buy pasta in the store? I recommend trying my method. I guarantee you will love it. Before adding the noodles to the broth, you need to dry them a little. Some people do it in the oven, while I take the noodles to the porch to dry in the sun. But that's not all. I used only half of the dough from the noodles. To the other half, I add mashed sweet potatoes and canned peas. And while these new ingredients are getting to know each other, I add meatballs to the broth. You can also add sliced carrots and dried noodles. Bay leaves and peppercorns are added to taste at the end, when the soup is almost ready. Spices help to relieve the taste of the dish and make it unique. That's why I never neglect them. Now is the time to go around the gardens and harvest your first crop. A variety of salads, broccoli, cabbage, and other greens grow very well here. The same goes for zucchini. In fact, many people consider these vegetables to be tasteless. I would say that these people just do not know how to cook them. Young zucchini I treasure because they contain a lot of nutrients. This year spring was very warm, so the harvest is early in summer. Tomatoes are already ripening in my garden, so I can make my favorite summer salad from my own vegetables. Just look how beautiful it is. In the meanwhile, it's time for me to put my homemade bread in the oven. I make 3 versions of bread without any additives, with sweet potatoes and with peas. And to make it beautiful and appetizing, you should brush the top with an egg before baking. I make several small cuts in the dough. This is necessary, firstly, so that your crust on the bread does not crack during baking, and secondly, it just looks beautiful. You can also decorate the top of the bread with nuts, seeds, and anything else that comes to mind. The oven has already heated up well, so the bread is ready to bake. Now you just have to wait a little bit and you can enjoy a delicious lunch made entirely from homemade ingredients. This food is healthy, but is not also delicious, and if you have lunch with a beautiful mountain view, you can enjoy it even more. The bread is already ready. Just look at this beauty. It's fluffy, fragrant, and so delicious that you just can't stop with one piece. And with homemade soup, with meatballs and noodles, this bread tastes the best. In the summer, I only eat outside, of course, if the weather permits. Eating delicious food and listening to birds singing, what could be better? Today my morning starts with working in the garden. Near our house, we made these beds where vegetables and herbs grow. It's convenient because I don't have to go to the market or store to buy tomatoes. They grow in the yard. But to get a good harvest, you have to work hard. One of the peculiarities of living in the mountains is that the soil is quite stony. That is why these areas have never been farmed, but modern technology allows us to create small beds with nutritious soil. So, when the tomatoes I need for today's lunch are already picked, I hurry to the table outside to do my favorite thing, cooking delicious food. Today I need fresh pork. I take a loin, it's tender, not too fatty, but still juicy. I cut the meat into small pieces with a sharp knife. I also need onions. I peel and chop it. Now I peel the potatoes. It's good that I have a special vegetable knife that can do all this very quickly. After that, I move on to the most interesting and rather unexpected ingredient. I cut dried prunes into pieces. It's a popular ingredient for desserts, but it's not the only option. Prunes go very well with meat and vegetables. They give a wonderful flavor and bring out the taste of other components of the dish. I need to heat up the stove to cook on it. That's right, even in summer you have to keep firewood in stock. But cooking on the stove is a special pleasure because the dishes immediately acquire a completely unique flavor. You just have to wait a little bit until the wood is well lit. I put a frying pan on the stove, add vegetable oil, and put the meat in to fry and stew a little. And while the meat is frying, I have time to chop the peeled and washed potatoes. Summer is in full swing, but I can already feel a slight breeze of approaching autumn. I keep an eye on the meat so that it doesn't burn. It needs to be stirred periodically. I add onions to the frying pan, and immediately the kitchen has a wonderful aroma that provokes appetite. I add a little salt and spices to the almost cooked meat. The individual ingredients of my dish are already prepared, and I just need to combine them together. But first, I prepare a classic white sauce based on flour, milk, butter, and spices, and now I graze ceramic jugs with butter. Put meat, potatoes, and prunes in each one. This dish is called pichenya here, but it has nothing to do with sweet biscuits. In fact, pichenya is meat stewed in jugs with vegetables and a special sauce. I put all the ingredients in several layers so that they bake evenly. Then I pour white sauce into each pot. By the way, traditionally roast is cooked with kvass or whey, but I like the more delicate creamy taste. And of course, I put grated hard cheese on top. It adds its own flavor notes. And now it's time for baking. I will do this in the oven as well. Pots made of high quality clay can withstand high temperatures and do not deteriorate even in direct contact with fire. And the taste of such a dish will be very different from a similar one baked in an electric oven, for example. You can take off your apron, but first you need to bring a supply of firewood into the house. It is not as easy as it may seem at first glance to melt the stove to bake various dishes in it, but this can also be learned. It is important to stake the firewood in a special way and be sure to put dry paper, which ignites first. The weather is beautiful outside today. The sun's rays touch the mountain peaks, causing them to instantly change their shade. In fact, these metamorphoses are no less interesting to watch than a theater performance or a movie. I can watch an open fire with the same delight. By the way, the stove has already warmed up well, so we can send the pots to bake. I put them in very carefully, one by one, so as not to burn myself or knock over the dishes. While the dinner is baking, I water the potted flowers in the yard. You have to use every free minute to do something else useful. I try to surround myself with beauty that will delight my eyes. Meanwhile, the roast is ready and I can take the clay pots out of the oven. They are very hot, so I do it very carefully. Lunch is almost ready. I am going to taste it now, thanks to the sauce and cheese. This is a fragrant golden crust and the potatoes and meat are well cooked. And in the afternoon you can do some needlework. I cut the fabric with special sharp scissors and then sew the individual parts together with an electric machine. It's a filigree job, but then it's very nice to realize that I did it all on my own. I'll show you how it turns out later. But for now, I want to thank you for spending this day with me.